This past week, or on Friday, we got Masters of the Universe Revelations. This part one only had 5 episodes. I forget, or I don't, it hasn't been revealed when part 2 comes out. Part 1 came out, and this is sort of a review of part 1. So I think the elephant in the room with this is this was advertised one way, and what we got was something different. Now I think there's kind of this whole argument here that should movie or TV advertising be honest? Should you know what you're getting, basically? And should they deliver that to you? And there is a whole theory of like audiences do not like sort of getting tricked. I actually think it's kind of fun. But a lot of people, most modern audiences do not like that. It's sort of...
Olive, what are you doing back there?
This is a follow-up to the original series. I didn't watch too many negative, creepy reviews of it. Someone who, I think his name is Superior Secrets, I forget the YouTube channel, but he does basically toy reviews, and he was a brand manager for Masters of the Universe for a little bit. He was also a fan of Masters of the Universe before he became the brand manager. And he talked about the new show. And he really likes the show and what it does with the characters and everything like that. But he brings up a thing where he didn't like the advertising. He didn't like the idea that basically, like, don't say that this is a He-Man show when it's actually a Teela show. Why not just say this was the Teela show? Because that's kind of the big twist, is you find out this is not about He-Man, it's about Teela, and people are getting upset about that. Now, I understand there is obviously some very misogynistic, shitty, Kevin Smith ruined He-Man kind of thing. You know, I noticed all these people said Kevin Smith has no integrity. So this was the line, guys. Like, I do not understand that necessarily. But I do get that it upset people that they were being told they're getting one thing and they sort of got it for an episode. It seems like basically it will become what they wanted to the next part of the season, but that's not what they got. I get that being upset that, hey, I thought I was getting this thing, I didn't. I still think it's a good show beyond that. I think the problem with He-Man in general is that you kind of get more things about He-Man and Skeletor and you don't get to show anybody else really. And this show, you got to basically just do everyone else because they were kind of out of the picture after episode 1, which is also reminds me of 2000s pilots or first episodes where you think the show's going to be one thing. They have a massive switcheroo at the end of the episode, and you're like, wait, what is this show? Like the end of First Friday Night Lights does that. I think there's a couple other shows that do that. It's pretty common. Or if you watch the first episode of Ozark, that first episode is insane. My wife was watching it, and I was like, is this the last episode of Ozark? And she's like, no, it's the first one. I was like, what? And it's like this insane episode. Like, I watched it, and I was like, that's an insane way to set up a show. But it is an insane way for this one, and I think that's not what you get from these type of things. It is a little more challenging. And I've noticed with anything from nostalgia, people who, and they have tons of action figures behind them and stuff like that, get very upset because obviously they don't watch challenging entertainment and don't want to be challenged by storytelling. So they're basically saying like anything that challenges their point of view or changes it is inherently bad because they are not, you know, really like well-educated viewers. They're just consumers and they do consumer report reviews and that's their whole thing. And I guess that's fine. They're just kind of endless, you know, shills for capitalism, and they have no real point of view or any integrity in terms of art and storytelling, and they really shouldn't be reviewing things. But that's just what I think. So, Master Universe Revelations, basically, to sum it up, and this is the spoiler part, is that you find He-Man and Skeletor. They have this epic battle. It's like the greatest battle. Olive, you are everywhere tonight. Is the greatest battle you have ever seen in a He-Man cartoon. I would say probably ever. And instead, they basically like kill each other in the end. And Teela finds out that Adam is He-Man she never knew before, and that everything kind of falls apart. And then you kind of cut forward, and everything has fallen apart, and she's kind of on adventures by herself, and she's trying to get the sort of power back because without it. So basically, everything that Teela has led to believe in her safe world has been changed, and she's upset about it. Oh man, it's almost like the people who are upset at this show are Teela. Whoa. So she has to match up with Evil Lynn and figure this out, basically. And there's a whole thing at the end that I don't want to get into. But I actually really like this. My deal with Master of the Universe, I don't know if I've talked about it or anything before, is my parents are, you know, like, were like yuppies and stuff, and they weren't like into me watching violent animation because they're like, we're hippies, and it's like, if we don't let our kid watch violent cartoons, they'll be the better for it. And then they realized that was a terrible idea, and I had nothing to talk about anyone with because all I watched was Sesame Street, which is fine, but you can watch other stuff too. And they let me watch He-Man, and I became obsessed with He-Man. And I saw the original in theaters, which my mom took me to because she's a cool mom. The only thing I really remember about that movie is that I really liked it. Everyone laughed at the woman at arms joke, which they didn't do in the show, which is like my biggest complaint, as well as everyone was way taller than me. I remember that. I like what they did with the show because it challenged it. It did something new with the franchise. I do think each reboot tries to change things up. If you follow the whole continuity of reboots, like the New Adventures of He-Man was probably one of the most radical up to this one, where He-Man and Skeletor go to like a different dimension or whatever. We also got the 2002 one, which I don't remember and watched a lot of like my first couple of years of college, but like I do not remember it at all. And this one sort of does the same thing, but it goes more into the other characters of the world. The thing is about Master Universe, it was called Master Universe and not He-Man, to be fair, but there's like such a rogues gallery, such a good collection of characters and vehicles and all that stuff that it actually like sort of makes sense to do a show without He-Man in this. I do agree, and the guy who did that, and I will have him actually linked in the description because I'm mentioning him so much, brings up that like they should have just said it was a Tila show and they wouldn't have had to deal with all this. And then because there is another He-Man thing happening, Netflix is doing other He-Man stuff, it would have actually made a little more sense had they done it the correct way rather than kind of like mess with the fans in a way. I think that didn't necessarily work. I liked all the references in it. I like the idea that Henry Rollins plays this. Henry Rollins is in this. I don't think no one's really talked about that. He plays like a robotic preacher because this whole idea of like science and technology should rise up as magic is falling, which is like an interesting way to take it. It really is kind of a way someone really actually thought about the iconography of He-Man Master Universe and did interesting things with it. I think it does try to challenge you in a way. It is kind of like a Master Universe show made for the little kids who were, I was like very little, 3 or 4, but there are people up to like 10, 12 who are into this thing, and now that we're like in middle age pretty much, it's more for people in that. I liked everything they did from like the Tila character, especially, who's voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar. Mark Hamill's Skeletor is amazing. Eva Lynn, who is voiced by, I forget her name, but she was on Game of Thrones. She's really great. They do a lot of great things with the iconography and the characters and the IP and make it kind of like this fully fleshed out, interesting world. It is sort of like the same idea as the Thundercats reboot. Like, let's take Thundercats and make it into this ever-expanding, like, sort of almost Avatar-esque kind of story. And I guess that's what they're doing here. It seems like they're saying more about tradition and generations and the idea of hiding. Like, I haven't seen too many things like re-examine a hero and talk about the idea of like you're friends with someone and they have a secret identity and you've lived under the eyes of like, she's lived with like and fought with He-Man so many times that she doesn't know who he really is. And that is an interesting dynamic to play with. And I actually like what they're doing. I like the idea of what they're playing with here because it's an interesting idea to take the idea of He-Man, to take the idea of these characters and turn them on its head. This might be a little more radical than what She-Ra, because She-Ra is like completely different, like isn't playing with the iconography. This is, which the New Adventures of He-Man actually did. It is a direct follow-up, direct sequel to the original classic show. The classic show was kind of garbage. They couldn't be as violent. They just like did silly things. It was really stupid in certain degrees. It was well designed. It's sort of like a little kid's heavy metal magazine kind of Frank Frazetta Conan thing, which I know they took designs from Conan and made it into He-Man supposedly or whatever. I really like this show. I was really into it. I was surprised. It goes down very easily. Like I watch these very quickly one after the other. And I was surprised I did. I didn't think I would get as into it. Like I was like, I don't know. Can I keep going down this road? I've watched every single one of these shows. And I've been liking this since I was a little kid. Can I get into this again? And even though it is still the same toy commercial it ever was, it's almost like makes you want to re-examine those old toys or the second line in the 2000s or something like that. I had a good time with it. It got the characters, it got what was so great about them, it got that whole universe. It is sort of the best like fantasy sci-fi hybrid, I think, in the post-Star Wars world that isn't Star Wars. I think this is a great show. I think if you like Master Universe and grew up with it, give it a chance. I understand actually if people are a little upset because it isn't what you signed up for. And I think like this isn't the show with all its nostalgia that you're looking for a challenge with. But I think it takes the IP and the characters and the world into an interesting place. And I'm super excited to see part 2. I'm really curious. Maybe I'll review a part 2, see where we're going with there. But I think it's really interesting. It's also interesting what we're doing with these characters who, both He-Man and She-Ra, who are sort of almost disregarded and weren't given the big screen adaptations like the Transformers or something, and they're able to free themselves kind of their iconography and make, you know, kind of really interesting statements and interesting things with these characters. And I really like that about both these things. I think this shares a lot of interesting ideas. With She-Ra, the difference is this is taking the classic stuff and pushing it into an interesting, weird direction that we've kind of never seen before. So I really hope. I like what they did with Orko even. Especially the kind of heaven dimension and all the He-Man references, other He-Man variant references Wonder Bread He-Man makes in here. It's cool, all the reference, and it doesn't do it in the over referencing or being like, did you get it? If it does it in a very natural way, or at least I thought. I would recommend this show if you like kind of fantasy, sci-fi and stuff, but I would also, like, if you're a fan of the original Masters Universe, I think you'll like where it pushes it. Pushes it in an interesting way. I thought Kevin Smith did a good job. I don't think he failed my childhood. He did that with his own material, not with He-Man, so it's fine. But I would say that this is a worthy follow-up for the show, and it's an interesting place to put it. And it's a franchise that I thought I was just going to watch and like watch a few episodes and be like, oh yeah, that's He-Man, but it's violent. And it actually was thought-provoking and made me think about the ideas of like religion even, and taking this franchise and the idea of secret identities and what that would really mean in real life and all those things. It's actually thought-provoking, and I don't think that's something you ever thought you'd hear from a show and a franchise like Masters of the Universe.